Alrighty, so today we're going to be doing the 3-point moving mean in Excel. So you can see I've already typed the data in. Took a little bit of time, but as long as you're nice and careful and slow, you can enter in the data pretty quickly. Now what we can do is just some really quick formatting things before we get started. Is you can click down the format and just go auto width. And what that's going to do is it's just going to squish down the table a little bit. However, I might just zoom in a bit to make it a little bit easier to read. Alrighty, so there's my data. It's just sitting there nicely. So remember with the 3-point moving mean, that you lose the endpoints, because remember when I smooth these three pieces of data, 29, 35, and 85, it doesn't belong to the 29 or the 85, it belongs to the 35, which means it belongs to 1879. So I'm actually going to not put a formula in this box here. So to remind myself of this so that I don't accidentally wonder why there's a blank spot, I might just color it black. And similarly, when I get to the end of this game, I'm going to be averaging these three numbers, 84, 107, and 110. And that's going to belong with the 107. Why? Because that's where it belongs, 1887. Which means that there's not going to be anything here. So I'm just going to put a black spot there to remind me. This is a good way of making sure you don't accidentally smooth the data too far. If I drag my formulas all the way over, I'll actually show you what happens, because sometimes weird things can happen. So let's start with our basic formula. So there's a few ways you can do it. One way is using the average. Now the average, you just select which numbers you want to average, and then like these three, and then there's our formula done. And I can repeat that. Make sure you put an equal sign. If you don't put an equal sign, it's not going to work. And then you can just click enter. But some of you probably already started to feel a little bit lazy after just watching those ones for the first bit. And what we can do instead is we can actually drag this formula across, and you can see that it's just automatically going to do it. So if I look at 209, you'll see that this value is based on the number 1883, and then also its two neighbors. Okay, and so we can continue dragging it along. Now, let's drag it into this next cell, and it still produces a number, okay? But think about what it's doing. What it's doing is it's averaging these three cells, right? So it thinks this cell must be a 0. So it's actually averaging these two cells. Well, actually, no, it's not even including that one. It may look like it's including that one, but because it's blank, the average cell knows that blank cells don't do anything. But this is why it's so important, because in Excel, you can click and drag things, and it'll do things for you. But we don't want it to do things there, okay? So now we can zoom out a little bit. I might need to just expand these a little. Oh, it's really gotten some long decimal places. Give me a second. So one of the things that we want to do is have a consistent rounding. So let's just go over here and just make sure that all of these are rounded to the same decimal place. That looks good. 1 decimal point. Unfortunately, with the 3-point moving mean, when you're dividing things by 3, the usual things that can happen is that you can end up with either 0.33333333 or 0.66666666, or it's a whole number. One of those few options. So let's just select the whole thing. Let's go insert. Let's go to our charts. Now, let's have a look. If we go to line graph, see, this is what we don't want to see. We don't want 3 lines. So it's always careful to have a look through. Go away from there. And we're going to go instead down to here, to the scatter plot. Okay? But because this is time series data, we actually want the dot to dot. So this is the one we're looking for. And you can actually see that's a pretty good looking graph. Now I haven't actually shown how to do this in normal Excel, so let's just, we can do our quick things. So we can add things like our primary vertical, our primary horizontal axes, so we can label those. You can see it's got the legend. Legend's really important this time because we are now showing 2 different pieces of data at the same time. But the other thing that we might want to show is then do like a line of best fit, but we've actually got 2 lines to choose from. So let's click on this one and add a linear trend line. Now you notice it's only created one, right? And this linear is for the 3-point moving mean. If I click on the blue line and add a trend line, now it'll give me another one for the migration. Okay, also for the original data. So, just be mindful that if you are adding a trend line like this, that strange things can happen. And so if you don't select either, then it will just ask you, do you want it for the migration on them? Which one do you want it for? All right. Actually, going back to that just for a second, let's just do one for the 3-point moving mean. To get the equation. Now, I was showing the weird way because I was on my tablet. I'm on the big computer today, so what can we do? Well, if we click on it, double click on it. In fact, you should be able to get up this formatting option here. And down the very bottom here, you'll see there's a display equation on chart and display R² value on chart. We're generally going to be using both of these options pretty happily. And you can kind of see there's our equation for the line. All ready to go. Alrighty. So that's just a quick sort of introduction on how to do it. So always make sure you go through and put in your axes titles and stuff. And then we've got our equation and everything ready to go. I can copy that, pop that in here. And there is my graph, and there is my raw data. Alright, I showed you one formula for doing average. Some of you prefer doing that plus that plus that divided by 3. That's fine. If you want to do that instead, you should get the same ones. If you go this plus this divided by 3, this isn't going to work. And why? Because order of operations. Excel actually knows order of operations, and it knows it very, very well. Let me just zoom in and try that again. So if I go this plus this divided by 3, it's not going to work. And the reason it's not going to work is that of order of operations. Division happens before addition. So even though these additions are written first, the division is going to happen first, which means all that's going to happen is that 85 is going to get divided by 3, and then we're going to add 29 and 35 to it. So we need to tell it the order we want it to do things in. We want it to add first, so we put the addition in brackets, and then do the division. So brackets are a way of just changing the order of preference. And now we can drag this equation across, and hopefully none of the values change. Alrighty, and there we go. There is our data. You can use either formula. Both work, which is great. Alrighty, I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.